So, Cindy, welcome.
Good morning. Welcome. I'm excited to chat with you.
I want to ask you my first question, which I thought was interesting when I asked you. You said you're struggling with the current state of the world. So, humans need connection, and the mainstream narrative is encouraging isolation and division in a time when we need to come together. I need to get your thoughts on this.
Whew, I wondered if you were going to bring that up.
Of
Well,
course.
yes. And so, in trying to stay non political, but still raising some questions, I feel like there's been a lot of focus over the last 18 months, almost 2 years, of, masked up. So we're tending to avoid looking at people in the eye. We are not supposed to hug people. We're not supposed to let them into our houses. And so all of that makes me very concerned because you go see someone and you recognize them and you want to approach them and say hello, and they almost step a little bit back from you. And that's definitely not the way the world was going 5 years ago. We were all getting very comfortable with sharing our emotions and telling friends that we loved them and, hugging our family members. That wasn't even when I was growing up. We did not tell people that we loved them. We did not hug people that we met for the first time. And then all of a sudden, all of that is bad and we're not supposed to do that. And that just makes my heart hurt.
I feel that. Working in real estate, obviously the normal is you shake hands. So then I started real estate during the pandemic. So it's like obviously there was no shaking hands, but now we're in that kind of limbo where people are starting to shake hands, but I've always been a hugger. So I'm like, I wanted to hug you during the pandemic, let alone shake your hand. But now, yeah, you kind of do this little dance of like, what are you comfortable with? Do we handshake? Do we hug? I think people are getting a little bit more comfortable. And I feel like it's almost like a timing thing where I personally feel like we've been doing this enough. If you don't have it sorted out yet, like I'm kind of going to do my own thing, you know?
Absolutely. And I'm on the same page as you, while knowing that some people aren't there yet. And
No.
I respect that, but I worry for those people. I worry for people that have not had any physical contact for 2 years.
What I always find interesting is how you could be living a very similar life as someone. You might live in the same condo complex, you might live on the same street, but you have completely different senses of reality, like completely. And you could be served all the same media, you could be living the same daily life, but your sense of reality is completely different. And my example of that is there's still people who are not seeing certain family members. There's still people who they wouldn't dream of getting on a plane right now. And it's funny, it's like I went traveling for a full month in August, both within Canada and internationally. And I totally forgot this was all a thing. And I came back and I'd come into my condo and people would be like, oh, only two people per elevator. I'm like, wow, we have very different senses of reality right now. You know what I mean?
You're right. But I did see a post from a friend of mine this week, and it was a person who travels for work outside of Canada.
Mhm.
And again, like, even though you and I might see the same media, we don't often see what's going on outside our own country, and it's very different. So I guess, that's what I would try to tell people is look at news from everywhere you can. And even if that means the not so mainstream spaces, right?
A lot of people put themselves in an echo chamber, don't they? I'm putting myself in one too, but my echo chamber is people who are living their life.
I'm with you.
Oh my. Okay, so the next question I want to ask you is about what you've overcome. Obviously, we touched on what you're struggling with today, and that's all current and something that we're all struggling with now. But you went through a bit of a whirlwind over what is it, the last 5, 10 years? 10.
10
I
years.
think I think the main thing happened when 10 years ago, because your daughters were teenagers, right?
Correct. Yes.
So I want to give the audience a sense of, I want to put you back into that place when kind of everything blew up. Now, you wrote a book recently, and I want to read a quote from the book that really sets the stage. And when I read the first chapter of your book, I was like, oh my God, I'm like, give me this juicy story, Cindy. One of the quotes that stood out the most to me, and you said, quote unquote, I had more questions than answers, but one thing I knew for certain, the man I had been sharing my home, my family, and my life with for the last 6 years had been living a lie. The man I thought he was didn't exist. I had been in love with a stranger. So that's what happened. So give the audience a little synopsis of what went down, and then we'll tell everyone kind of how you've managed to get to where you are today.
Absolutely. And can I just even go back a little bit
Of
further?
course.
Because I feel like one of the things that I want people to know is, I grew up, had a pretty boring life. Nice neighborhood, nice parents, married a nice guy, left the nice guy, the father of my children, and fell in love with somebody who swept me off my feet. I was head over heels in love for the entire time we were together. That being said, I had these whispers, these nudges of doubt. I knew that something was going on, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I started second guessing myself. I started questioning myself. And you know, it wasn't until the start of the book where I woke up one morning, the doorbell rang, and 7 police officers burst into our house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't even know if I've ever seen 7 police officers together at one time, let alone in my damn house. And you said you were living a pretty boring life. Like you feel you're the last person that should have 7 police officers in your house.
That's exactly it. Like I had no but as I said, like I knew that there was some suspicious activity happening in the sense that the person I was with, all of a sudden, his phone had a passcode on it, and he was staying away from the house more than ever. So I didn't know, like, was there infidelity going on? But I never imagined that he would be arrested for voyeurism.
Out of all the things that you could think, that's probably the absolute last.
The absolute last.
And I feel like voyeurism is not really well talked about. Like it's not you hear of someone robbery, you hear of infidelity, you hear of someone being involved in drugs, but that's kind of the one that's we forget about, you know?
I think you're right. I think we forget about it because
It's not I don't want to say innocent, but it's not as like harsh as something like, oh, they're drugs, there's infidelity, they hurt someone, you know?
and I think that for most people, I hope that it's something that doesn't even cross their mind because it's so icky, right?
It's
But
darker than almost the harsher things.
it is darker. And it's a whole, like to wrap your mind around it even is it's, it's a place you don't want to go to. You don't want to go down that path.
The question that I have for you is if 7 police officers are coming to your door and arresting someone for doing that, they don't just get tipped off for one incident. So obviously these police officers or someone is building a case for a while and they know it's been going on for a little bit. So I don't understand how all of these people can know what's going on, but you are living with this person and you have no idea. And I think that's where all of the hurt is, you know?
The hurt and the betrayal. And you're
Yeah.
right. I mean, somebody did tip, a coworker tipped off the police once they saw something on a work computer. And so, because that was suspicious enough, it raised questions. And that's what led to the warrant, I guess. I didn't see a warrant, but that's what led to them storming into our house and confiscating all of our technology and hauling him away in handcuffs.
How old are your daughters at this point?
16 and 13.
I know what my initial thought would be, and I'm sure you as well, being women. I'm afraid for my daughters. This man, if this is what he's into and has been for a while, and I've been living with him for 6 years, like I would the last 6 years of the relationship would spiral through and be like, what did I miss here? I'm worried for my daughters. Did anything happen? Did they know anything? Talk to me.
Absolutely. So, and that's exactly what happened. So, as they were hauling him out of the house, and I can't even, it's such a fog to me now, but I remember them saying, there's going to be a restraining order against him seeing your children. And I was like, well, obviously, like, we're never seeing him again.
You
Like,
don't
we
need to
were
put that
like,
in, like, no problem here. That will never be happening.
he turned around, this officer, and said to me, well, you'd be surprised. You'd be one of the few mothers that don't let them back in.
Whoa. I'm sure you have 2 thoughts. The first thought is, "You don't know me." Like, yeah, maybe I am one of those few mothers. But the second thought is I'd have heartbreak for all the people thinking about what they go through and thinking, "Wow, someone could do something so awful to you and you would take them back." Like, my heart goes out to those people.
I think that's exactly what I felt, indignant and angry. And
Mhm.
then it was such this reality shock that, what? There's people that would let someone like this back into their house?
I know. So I know based on your first chapter what you did in that instance, you went into absolute fight or flight mode, mostly fight. I feel like you pushed everything down and went into action mode and got the girls out, went to your parents' house. When did you start processing the emotions? I guess. Because
Uh,
you're similar to me. When someone like hurts me like that and it's kind of out of nowhere, I go into instant fixing mode. And it's such a defense mechanism.
it was a different. I can't believe now, looking back, that I just was like, they left. I grabbed the kids, grabbed some toothbrushes, the cat, and went to my parents. Like, that to me is just like, I'm kind of proud of myself looking back
But a
because
little clinical.
yeah, like what I wanted to do was go back to bed and have a nervous breakdown.
But you have 2 daughters. You have to figure something out. If it's not you figuring out who is. You're the type of person that I can't just lay in bed and wallow in these emotions, like, I gotta fix this, even though this is not even my problem.
Yeah, I'm glad that you said that because that is one thing that I knew very early on is that this was not my problem. I knew that people saw me as the victim and I was not going to take that on. That's his story. People have asked me if I followed the court case and went to court and all of those things. I never did. I did not want to associate myself with his chapter.
Wow, that's a lot of strength.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this, like, what were the next steps? Right away, did you just kinda wipe your hands clean of it? I'm sure you're in a town if people know about this stuff, I'm sure there's a lot of questions and gossip happening.
Lots of questions, lots of gossip.
How did you deal with that?
Well, what I did is, and again, this is my perception of how it all went down. So we owned the house together. The first thing that I did was I found a tenant for the house to buy us some time so that because I obviously just couldn't leave this house sitting here and be responsible for all the like that's just not reality. So I had to stay in touch with him and made sure that he had zero contact with my children.
Of course.
But I had to see him. I had to see him during the course of that year with really strong boundaries. And also, let me make it clear you cannot be in love with somebody before you go to bed one night and wake up the next morning and hate them.
Yep. That doesn't just wash away. You can have so much hate in you and betrayal, but, like, all those years don't just go poof.
No. And I had a million questions and I wanted answers and I wanted to try and understand it and all of those things. So there was a process, right? But I made sure that I had really strong boundaries. I made sure that we were not ever going to be like the line in the sand was drawn.
Mhm.
He hurt me and my family and broke the trust. So there was no going back. I needed to move forward, but I had to fall out of love with him
And on your own.
and on my own.
Did you get any answers to all the questions that you had? Have you ever spoke to him? Have you ever gotten answers?
Mm, I've maybe gained some clarity, but not really answers. I don't think anybody can tell me exactly why he was in the state that he was and doing the things that he was doing. There's probably some addiction issues,
Yes.
lots of addiction issues.
I know you said earlier there was kind of some whispers, some doubt, but anything around that that you would have in any realm of the sense think, "Oh, maybe he's into this."
No,
No?
none. No. At the Worst case scenario, I thought he was cheating on me.
Yeah. And it's interesting to watch you, like, kind of, like, laugh at it, be like, "Of course not." You know? And it's I think that's what people are always shocked about. It's sometimes you actually don't know the person that you sleep next to every single night, and that's really scary. And when that's in the back of your head, how do you ever become intimate with someone again? I've never had anything like this happen to me, but levels of trust broken, and it's so hard to get it back, even with a completely different person.
You carry a lot of baggage after
Oh,
that,
yeah. Many suitcases.
many suitcases.
But, you mentioned an interesting word, addiction. So, obviously, this is his own issue, and he has to go kind of figure out why this is a problem for him. Do you think he ended up doing that? Like, is there, like, a rehab to this type of thing? Like, what do you do next? Like, do you go to jail? Do you just go on house arrest? Like, what happens in this scenario?
He went to jail.
Okay, for how long?
Um, I think the indictment was 2 years. I don't think he served 2 years. And then I believe and I'm sure that there was counseling as part of that, but I don't know the details of that. I've never seen him since.
It's interesting. The world can be so small, but also so big.
Yeah.
The universe does protect us from people that, like, you don't need to see that person. They could live a few streets away for all you know.
Yeah, and that's bizarre. Like, for a long time, I would always be sort of looking over my shoulder and because he wanted to pursue a relationship with me after this was all taken care of,
You're
right?
literally insane.
Anyway,
Are you on the sex offenders list after that?
I would assume so,
Yeah, something along that line.
but whoever sees that list, where's that
So
list?
that's the next question I was gonna ask. What's the point of having a list if the public doesn't have access to it?
Right.
Like, who's the list for? What's the point?
I don't know.
And does he kinda rehabilitate back to normal life? How do you prevent this stuff from happening again? And I'm not asking expecting you to be an expert, I'm more just curious.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. It's interesting to me that you kind of just like, this is not my issue. That's his chapter. And I like the way you said that.
Thank you.
Yeah. I want to ask about your daughters. How do you think they were affected in the moment? Do you think they were affected long term?
Yes. Social services had to check in with them. So
Okay.
that's heartbreaking as a mother to think that you've
In
put them in
danger.
that
Yeah.
situation. I got them both counseling when they were young. It's interesting because this topic has come up recently. They probably still both need some counseling because they too had a relationship with this person. I mean, we know that there was nothing physical that happened to them, but we don't know the extent of the emotional damage and also the trust, right?
Yeah. Like that would affect a lot of male relations because he was a father figure in their life. And to have that trust and betrayal happen with kind of the main father figure in your life. Yeah. That's scary.
Exactly. Yeah.
Is their dad in the picture at all?
He is in the picture in a casual way. Yeah,
Yeah.
he is.
And do they have a relationship with him?
Somewhat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because your daughters are my age, and I ask these things because I know through my own personal life and my friends, I feel like we don't notice at times, but definitely our relationship with our dad or the father figure in our life definitely transcends into our own relationships and dating life, good and bad, and what we expect of a partner and kind of our patterns in that. So, and I'm sure, like I said, they're my age, so I'm sure they're still figuring those things out as they get older.
They absolutely are. And I just encourage them and anybody else. I mean, I think therapy probably is the answer
Mhm.
because the only way for them to thrive is to be okay with some of the decisions that other people have made, right? Whether that's their biological father, this person, or even any people that they date in their lives that are males, right? It's messy.
It is. And I think as women, there's always kind of this like little divide in the sand between men and females of wanting to feel safe. So when you've had examples in your life where men have made you not feel safe, it's hard to just erase that feeling afterwards, no matter how great the next man in your life is.
Even through all the work that I have done on myself, my default is when, not if they will let me down or break my trust. It's when.
And do you feel that that stops you from intimacy?
Well, I'm married now, so no, but still it does play a part because it's the place that I go to
Mhm.
when I'm worried is
Your default pattern.
my default pattern.
I wanna jump into that because I didn't know you were married. So when did you
Mhm.
get married again?
4 years ago,
4 years ago. So I need to know right now, was he one of the many dates?
maybe.
Your book, because I know, and we can jump right into this. When this happened to you, the resiliency in you in this moment is unfathomable, to be honest. The fact that this all happened to you, there's an arrest happening with someone that you've been with for the last 6 years. You feel like you're basically living a lie. And then all of a sudden you are running this very successful event, you're out dating. Like, how do we get from there to there?
Okay. Well, it wasn't as smooth as that. It actually just comes down to, so I told her that I wanted to distance myself from that relationship, which led me to focusing on creating an event for women.
Okay.
Did that. It was amazing. It restored my recognition that it is really important to have strong women in our lives and a tribe. And so that gave me some confidence. That gave me some new friendships to focus on. But for anybody, and again, I talk about being lonely. So now the event is over. I'm living at my parents' house. They're in Palm Springs for the winter. My kids are going back and forth to their dads every second week. When they're with me, they're dancing every night. What am I doing? I'm sitting at home by myself in front of the TV. Nobody cares if I fall asleep on the couch. Nobody cares if I brush my teeth before I go to bed. So I'm lonely and alone. And sometimes I could recognize the difference. But 6 months after this happens, the tragic event happens, I say to myself, okay, like your kids don't need you. They're safe now. They don't need you to be around every moment of every day. What's the pattern here? Are you going to be okay being alone for the rest of your lives? And I wasn't.
As a mom, how does that feel to not be needed anymore?
That's a whole other book.
Especially with teenage daughters at that time. Like, that's when they're really, like, distancing themselves. They come back again in their early 20s, but that period, it's like, "Oh my god."
Yes, they're really distancing themselves. They're busy. They have, like I said, dance and their own lives and they love me, but they're not like, "Hey mom, we don't want you to be alone on Friday night, so let's go out for pizza." They're not thinking that. And that's not their job.
Yeah. So what did you do?
So signed up with a very expensive matchmaking service, thinking, well, this will be great because they will do all sorts of, background checks and compatibility checks, and they will, maybe find me some suitable dates that I can trust.
Emphasis on the background check right now.
But there's
They
no
will pay a
background
premium
check.
for that one.
Yeah, there's no background check. There's no police check. I realized afterwards, but they did set me up with my first date. And it was a person who lived about an hour and a half out of Calgary, the city I live in. So that seemed pretty safe in a sense that, okay, good. Like I can manage to go on this date. And so we booked a coffee and I cried the entire time
On the
driving.
date? Oh, okay.
Not to the date, but in my car, just like, okay, Cindy, like it's gonna be okay. It's just one day. But I was bawling. Like
What did you look like when you got
yeah, I had really glistening, glowing eyes,
Uh-huh. And
and
naturally red cheeks.
naturally red cheeks. Yeah.
He probably thought you were beautiful.
Well, he did ask me out a second time.
Oh, so you did something right.
What I learned, and he was nice. It was fine. What I learned was he was just as nervous as I was, and I survived it. Wasn't terrible. It was 30 minutes of small talk, and it was worth the risk of instead of staying home and not willing to put myself out there. It was worth it.
What I'm hearing from you is you don't need to meet the next level of your life right away, but you have to take that small step. Put on an outfit, get the makeup done again, even if it's a 30-minute date and just a coffee, just get out there. And that's going to trickle into something bigger. And obviously you went on, what was it? 50 dates in 52 weeks?
50 date. So that was the plan. So
Okay.
after I went on that first date, I wrote a contract with myself and I challenged myself to go on 50 dates in 52 weeks.
And you did it.
And I did it.
So, what were some of the main lessons that you learned on going on all these dates? Because are these like 50 different men or just 50 dates?
50 different men.
Oh my God. I'm vicariously living through you. You lived your own bachelorette in a year.
I did. I
Oh my
truly did.
God. And well, did any
Be-
of them get roses?
So, I mean, it's not as glamorous. I had such unreal expectations. I was new to online dating. I kind of thought that you'd get matched up. And so I went on a number of dating sites and, thinking that a couple text messages and they would ask to pick me out for dinner. That's not really how the online dating game goes.
Is this your first time online dating ever at this point?
Yes. Huh. Yeah.
Not
So,
all
like I
it's
said,
cracked up to be.
no, I was pretty naive. However, what I think the biggest learning was about 6 months into it, and it's a lot of not great people and whatever, but what I realized 6 months into it was I was really just dating myself. Because if you remember that I told you I was bawling on the way to the first stage, imagine how much growth I had achieved 6 months into it after meeting
Absolutely.
25 different people. So that I was showing up differently.
Yeah. I've learned the most about myself while being in relationships because it's really just a mirror reflection of the stuff that you still need to work on.
Absolutely. And that's funny you say that because I was journaling this whole time. And so, for example, date number 6 stood me out. So I
Oh
counted
my
him,
God. I would count
but
it too. But holy ego first.
absolutely. I'm standing there in a coffee shop, smiling ridiculously at every man that walks in, thinking that's my date. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, everyone knows that I'm being stood up. This is so embarrassing. Or what if he did show up and saw me and left? That's the ultimate rejection. I wasn't good enough. So what I did with all of those examples, that thankfully he was the only person that stood me up, I gave myself little words of wisdom. And so that taught me never not show up for someone. Don't trifle with people's feelings. Respect this process.
Tell me some bad date stories.
Well, none of them were horrible. I mean, there was
Some
one,
frogs, though.
there was definitely some frogs, right? And your patience gets tested a little bit when you keep meeting the same types of guys. And as soon as you sit down, you think, oh, I don't know if I've got 20 minutes to spend with this person. But I always tried to be nice and I always tried to be kind. There was definitely, you know, this one guy that also taught me a little lesson in myself because we went out and he said, asked me how many dates I'd been on. And I think at that time it was, no, maybe 20. And he said, wow, he's like, well, like, what do you do if you meet someone and you just know they're not the right person? And I said, well, like you can never have too many golf partners. Like, whatever. And so we're chatting. We finished the date and he's this cute guy, dreamy green eyes. And I say, that was a lot of fun. Like that was great. And he says, yeah, next time we should go golfing. Yeah.
You're like, I thought I was smooth and witty, but ooh, I just met my match.
uh, And I'm like, okay, but
I
you know
got it.
what? Moving on.
But in that moment, I think in the moment I would have been like remembering, oh right, they're making an estimate and a judgment on me this whole time too. It's not just me getting to pick these people. They're also deciding if they like me. I think I'd forget that sometimes.
Absolutely. But it goes both ways. I think
Yeah.
so many times people are thinking, oh, pick me, pick me.
But do
When
you want to pick
really,
them?
do you want to pick them?
I see this in the dating world all the time. Oh, will he text me back? Did he like me? Does he want to see me again? I'm like, do you want to see him again? Ask. That's the question you should be asking yourself.
Absolutely.
And sometimes a lot of women, especially, don't ever have that conversation with themselves.
They just want to be picked.
Yeah. I think it comes back to the ego, the feeling of being liked. You're not even thinking, "Oh, did I even like him?" And it's a bit of scarcity mindset sometimes too, being like, "Oh, well, if it's not him, if he didn't pick me, I guess there's no one else." And that's such a narrow view.
That's why you need to challenge yourself to date 50 people.
A lot of people would argue with you, quality over quantity, but in this instance, it's no quantity over quality.
I've had people argue it. I think it's a numbers game.
Yeah.
I think it's no different than if you were to go out for dinner tonight in a restaurant full of people. You are not going to like every man in that restaurant, every woman in that restaurant. There might be two or three, but then you still need to narrow that down. Do they share a common interest? Are they a nice person? Do they share the same values? I don't think you can tell that by just saying, well, I didn't meet somebody after going on 3 dates, so there's probably no one out there,
Some people think like that though.
right?
Do you believe that there's this one person out there for you? Or do you believe there's many ones out there?
I think I believe there's many ones out there. I
Me too.
think that probably at different times in our lives, different people would be the one, but that doesn't mean that they're going to be the one for 50 years.
I know, but then how do you evolve with someone after? Like, how do you have this lifelong marriage?
Well,
Mhm.
continual work, I think. Yeah, I don't know. I've only been married for a few years. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, exactly. Tell me some other stuff that you learned about yourself through all this process. Did you have a certain person in mind that you were looking for? Or were you kind of just like going in and open and just like wanting to get yourself out there?
Well, let me tell you about the last month of dating during this
Okay.
journey. So I had the opportunity to go to Maui with a girlfriend, and two things happened. One is for some reason, I had this inspiration that during the month of December, I was going to really focus on gratitude. And
Mm.
so I chose a different person in my life every day for the month of December. And I wrote them a gratitude letter, text, email, thanking them for how they'd shown up in my life, whether I'd known them for 25 years or I'd known them for a couple of months. So I was really focused on this place of gratitude. And the day I was coming home from Maui, my friend says to me, "Oh my goodness, it's the anniversary of your first date, the one that I went crying on." And she said, "Now that it's been a year, you should really put down on paper what you're looking for."
Mm.
So the setting was beautiful. I'm in Maui. I'm looking at the ocean. I write this list. I say a prayer to the universe or whatever, just sort of saying, I think I've done the work. I'm ready to meet someone. And folded up the piece of paper, flew home. And the next message I received from somebody who wanted to date me turned out to be my husband that I'm with now.
So what does that tell you?
One is, I think it tells me to trust the process,
Mhm.
but I also think it tells me that I had done the work.
If he was, say, the 5th person you met on your 5th date, do you think you'd be together?
No,
I agree. Why?
because if he was date number 5, I was still pretty broken.
You're still
I
crying.
had, I was still crying. Yeah.
So what that tells me is 2 things. A lot of people think you need to be perfectly fixed before you can go actually meet your person. That's not true, but there is a level of you need to go explore those emotions and patch some things up before you're gonna be able to be available for someone if they do show up.
That's what it tells me as well, is that I know so many people are just afraid and they're like, well, not right now. I got to figure this out. I think you should go through this process when you are going through some hard stuff and dealing with some emotions. I think it's very cathartic.
I agree, and I know when I'm dating, I'm not looking for someone who's the perfect version of themselves, like, I'm okay with us figuring it out together. There's a lot more vulnerability and intimacy around that. I don't need you to be the absolute best version you've ever been. It's kind of boring.
It is kind of boring.
You don't learn anything about anyone when they're achieving everything and everything's so glorious. You learn the most about someone when they're going through the depths of some crap in their life.
But let's be clear. We also don't want to find somebody who's so broken that our main goal is to
Fix
try
them.
and fix them.
That's exhausting. I know people who have that pattern in dating that are always attracting people that they need to fix.
Yeah.
When you were going on all of these dates, I feel like a lot of questions oftentimes are, What brings you here? Why are you single?" So what was your answer?
I was always very honest. So I would tell people that I was on a dating journey. And some of them, I even told them that I was planning on dating 50 people. That was met with a variety of reactions for sure. But I also was pretty clear that I was looking to find someone that I could spend the rest of my life with.
Mhm. You had that as the end goal.
That was the end goal.
When some people heard that you were on a dating journey, you wanted to, like, date a lot of people right now, did that turn some people off?
Yes, I think it did. It may not have been super clear in that moment, but if you're having a really good date and then you don't hear from them again, that probably was part of it.
Mhm. Some people can't look past that. They're not willing to wait or not willing to watch someone kind of figure it out. They want to be the only person. They want that romantic notion.
Absolutely. And then I also think that there's a lot of people that I never knew exactly what their true intentions were either, right?
Of
You,
course.
you think that everyone's on the same page that you are, but I'm sure there were some people that were just a little disappointed that all we were really doing was having coffee. That was all. No,
Oh, don't get me started. Were all of these dates through the matchmaking service?
no, no,
They weren't worth the money?
no. I would personally recommend that that's not a good place to invest in your dating journey. It's very expensive. For example, my current husband, when I told him that I had done that, he said to me pretty clearly, is he would have never, ever had to pay money to join a dating service.
It's a big claim.
It is a big claim, but it does kind of make sense. He's a decent looking guy with a decent job who has, it just wouldn't have occurred to him that he would need to spend thousands of
Right.
dollars when he was meeting lots of people on his own
Mhm.
on a free dating service.
Interesting. What's the value add of a matchmaking service then?
I think this just their marketing claim is that they will do the background research to make sure you're compatible. But from the few people that I met through them, they weren't more compatible. They just were in their database.
Ugh. Fair enough, fair enough. So that journey ended, so you've been married for 4 years, so we're coming on, like, 5 years since you did that journey. What sparked you to write a book about it?
When I was going through the journey, I was telling people, and everyone would just say, "Oh my goodness, like that should be a book. That should be a book." And so when I finished the dating journey and some time had passed, I had this journal of all these dates. And, I just kind of thought, well, let me just put it down on paper and see how it feels. And then I let one or two people take a look at it. And people are like, yeah, you know what? Like, I think there's something there. And so I just kept sort of honing it and rewriting it. And again, I love that it's out there and I hope a million people read it if it gives them hope. But honestly, that was the ultimate part of the healing process, was writing it and putting it out there and closing the book afterwards.
What's the style of writing? Is it, like, each date, or is it more like lessons learned throughout this?
It's a combination. The best compliment that I've received is it's like going out for dinner over a glass of wine and hearing me tell my story.
They can hear your voice throughout the whole thing.
So I chronicle the dates, I chronicle the words of wisdom. I also had the opportunity to take Jenna and Sierra, my children, to Bali that year on a women's trip.
Wow.
So, and it's funny because when I first showed it to my original editor, she was like, "We don't care that you went to Bali. We don't care about your friend Susan. And argued with her and eventually fired her. But it's not how to find a guy. It's not, it is truly just here's a year and a half of my life and what I did to learn how to fall in love again with myself.
What do you think are the lessons your daughters have learned watching you go through this?
Oh, that's a good question. I hope what they've learned is never settle. And the most important person that you need to be true to is yourself.
And they've also learned a lot about resiliency. So many women, if they went through what you've went through, they'd still be single now, living vicariously through their own children.
That's a good point. Yeah, that is a very good point.
But you knew that it's not their job to take care of you. They have their own life. They're on their own path. It was up to you to take matters into your own hand and figure out what you wanted from your own life. Like you're an individual outside of them, even though you're a family unit.
Right. Same as I can't I can't make them live their lives how I want them to live their lives.
Hmm.
Right?
As
We're
much
all
as you want to sometimes.
much as you want to. And of course you want to save your children from hurt and lessons and all of that.
Mhm.
But we're just all humans trying to figure things out.
Have your daughters read the book?
My youngest has read the book a few times. She was one of my editors. So
Oh,
yes.
wow.
Yeah.
That's so nice.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's the type of book, it doesn't matter how old you are, you're gonna get the lessons that you need from it and the inspiration.
I think so. I mean, I've had men read it and enjoy it as well.
Really?
I think it's kind of cool. Yeah.
Very cool. So after that book, how has that opened up different platforms for you?
I think the opportunity to share as I am today with you has been one of the greatest joys. A few people have said, well, now that you have a book, that's your business card to become a professional speaker. That's not really my jam. I just want to engage in conversations with people like you and audiences that maybe need to hear a message of hope and inspiration right now and make my world and your world a little bit brighter.
Yeah, I feel that. Even though you went through that whole self-love journey and you're married again, what do you still struggle with in your own relationship? I know trust is a big one still.
Trust is a big one. What do I struggle with?
Does he see some of your patterns sometimes based on like your past?
We have great communication. So we both acknowledge sometimes because he's got his own stuff too from being in a loveless marriage for 20 years before he met me. So I didn't break up the marriage. He was already
Of
separated.
course.
But yeah, so I think one of the things is that when we are going through something, we will step back or the other person will say, hey, do you think this is about me? Or do you think this is some stuff that you're bringing in? So we have that ability,
Mm,
which I think is great because no matter what you're in, when you're in something, it's really hard to have clarity. Not till you can step away that you really can see things for what they are.
mm. With everything that happened, I know I made the comment earlier. I asked, like, have you even processed any of this? Like, you went into instant action mode. Throughout the years, do you feel like you've processed it all?
Yes, if you had asked me during it, I would have said that I was processing it, but truly I wasn't. I was in survival mode.
Of
I
course.
was just trying to make sure the kids are okay, trying to make sure that I was going to be okay. I probably didn't process it till I wrote the book.
Yeah, well, you said it was very cathartic
Yeah.
because you got to dig really deep to be thinking, okay, like, what did I learn here? Like, what was I really feeling in this moment? And as I mentioned earlier, I'm similar to you with if something happens to me traumatic, I go into busy mode to avoid any bit of emotion.
Exactly. Right. That's why writing and journaling and all that is such a good exercise because when you're writing it and you're writing that scene over and over and it's bringing up memories like, and you don't want to relive those memories necessarily, but every time you're faced to relive them, I think you heal a little bit.
Hmm.
Like I think I could now read my book and not cry.
And that's when you know.
That's
I
when
think
you
that's
know.
a great point when things that I've gone through in my life. I remember telling them the first few times and just telling stories to people and be like, oh my God, I'm like, I could cry right now. And when I tell these stories, I'm almost telling it like it's someone else's story, you know? And I say, oh yeah, okay, like I'm healed of this. I've moved on. I can talk about this very freely now. So that's when you know you're kind of a little bit healed. I
Yeah.
guess that's why people say time heals everything, maybe.
Time, but I think also it might be something that happened 10 years ago. And if it triggers an emotion, then you haven't faced it. So the time might temper it down a little bit, but I do think that if it still triggers that emotion, probably hasn't been dealt with.
A few last questions for you. Have you had anyone read your book that reached out and was really touched by the stories and it related to them? And what were the comments?
I have it, and I love that. And if any of your audience does ever read my book and they want to reach out, I'd love to hear from them. So I've had women that are going through not something similar in the sense what I went through, but women that have been single for a short period of time, or women that are just in the process of leaving their marriage. And they have reached out and they've said that my book has given them hope. I had one person reach out and she actually didn't love the book. She just found out that her partner had been cheating on her. And so she was pretty angry reading my book. But coincidentally, I just ran into somebody that knew her and that person was talking about my book and recommending it, which tells me that even though she was mad in the moment, when she stepped away from it, she recognizes that it's a good book to read. But yeah, it made her face some things that she probably wasn't wanting to face at that moment.
Probably was never going to.
Right.
I think she was probably mad that someone can go through something similar as me and be fine afterwards. I don't understand. Like where do they have that strength?
I lost my best friend of over 30 years during this. She could not handle that I got through this fairly unscathed.
Unscathed? Is she
Yeah.
insane?
I was supposed to not get over this. I was supposed to stay single and lonely. And so she was not able to embrace this at all.
Doesn't it amaze you how you can be friends with someone for 30 years and then you realize deep down we were only going to ever be friends if you felt that I was less than you or had less than you.
Yeah.
Like you wanted to be your friend when you were sad more than when you're processing and achieving things, succeeding. It's kind
Yeah.
of weird.
Weird.
How was that friendship breakup? Was it an obvious conversation that this friendship is no more or just kind of fell apart naturally?
No, there was some heated conversations. If she had been my spouse and I was definitely in a narcissistic abusive relationship with my best friend.
Wow.
I know.
Why do you think that she feels that you were unscathed? Because there's nothing about you telling me the story today that I feel that you were unscathed. Like, that's crazy to me. There's deep scars that are never going to be cured.
Absolutely. I don't know. The last time I saw her was at our wedding, and she didn't speak to me at the wedding and broke up by text after my wedding day.
The audacity of even coming to the wedding.
Yeah.
Is
That's
she
a
married? She must not be happily married or anything.
She's not married. She's single.
And she wanted you to be single with her.
Yeah.
Tell her to read the book and learn something.
Mm, I talk about that friendship as it's falling apart in the book as well. She probably knows my side of the story now.
It's in writing and printed.
Yeah.
What's the ultimate lesson that you've learned from all of this that you want to leave the audience with today?
Life's too short. Don't stay home falling asleep on your couch without brushing your teeth before you go to bed. Put yourself out there because life's too short.
Hmm. Do you feel like after all of this, you can handle anything that comes your way?
Well, I'd rather not have to find out, but yeah, I know I can.
Yeah. And where did you get that strength? Was it like, do you get that from your mom? Do you get that from your family? Was that always in you?
I'm pretty stubborn.
Mm.
And I think I forgot that part of me until I was faced with that. But even again, throughout the last 18 months, I'm pretty stubborn and don't, I don't always follow the beat of the same drum as everyone else.
Yeah, I see that. Last question for you. What's next? What happens now? In love, in business? Where does this take you?
Well, I put my Women Only Weekend on hold this year just to regroup, but really looking forward to having my 10th annual event next October in Canmore.
10
So
years. Wow.
excited about that. And, I just kind of want to fade away into the sunset. Like, I feel like I've left the legacy. My kids are going to be okay. And I just want to, be in love. And I
You
know it
wanna go
sounds,
back to that boring life.
I do kind of. There's nothing no boring.
No, I'm not saying there is. You're like,
Yeah.
I found the excitement, I enjoyed that, and I don't want it again."
Well, I want to be able to consider if there is a need for a big fight, I want to have the energy to be able to embrace it. Right. So no
Yes.
drama is not a bad thing.
No, no, I mean, you just said your current partner was in a loveless marriage, there was probably literally no drama, and
No.
sometimes that's almost worse.
Yeah.
I know. Okay, Cindy, I think this was awesome. Before I let you go, plug the name of the book and where everyone can find you as well if they wanna connect further.
Thank you. This has been so amazing. You can find my book, Reflections from the Dating Pool. Easiest place is probably on Amazon. But then I always want to hear from people their thoughts. So you can find me on www.cindydrummond.ca.
Amazing. Well, Cindy, thank you so much for your time.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.